to the tune of about $1.2 trillion. So the next step for this infrastructure package is to move through to signature, and then it'll take some time for the funds to become available. But the good news, again, is that the federal government continues to take action to help clients like yourselves address the challenges related to COVID and just in general the technology challenges that you're up against. So if we think about the landscape so far of the three packages that have been fully released, you have the CARES Act, again, from March 2020. You have the Consolidated Appropriations Act released and approved December 2020, and then the American Rescue Plan, March 2021. And in particular, you look at some of these verticals, but I'll call out in particular K-12. You see the level of funding and the increase over these three stimulus packages. So $17 billion was made available for K-12 through the CARES Act. Moved to December, the Consolidated Appropriations Act, $54 billion, and then $126 billion in March of 2021 through the American Rescue Plan. So again, the federal government continues to take action, and in particular, trying to arm the clients with the funding they need to deploy the technologies that they're after to address any manner of use case. So enhancing distance learning, campus safety, and on down through the list. And I won't pretend to know all the challenges that you as the IT representatives in education are up against, but we definitely recognize that there are challenges in getting your arms around the funding. So I usually, when I'm talking with clients about the stimulus, I call to attention the fact that the funding does vary. So there's a lot of variability from a per capita basis, but also since a lot of the funding flows through the governor has the ability to allocate the funds as they see fit. So maybe they're making heavier investment in K-12 versus higher ed, or maybe state government or public safety and so forth. So, you take these things all into account. The general grant landscape is confusing enough. You add over top of that the COVID stimulus-related grant funding, three packages that are currently released. Those three packages have overlapping timelines and expiration dates, and they have different qualifiers for what would apply for and align to the funding. So it ultimately becomes a very complex landscape for you, the clients, to figure out and to navigate through. So if you look at this graphic, this really talks to the generalized timeline for grant availability. So outside of COVID stimulus grants, on the left side of the screen, traditional timeline for grants usually runs between 24 and 48 weeks from the time that grant is announced to the time it is awarded. And by the way, your mileage may vary. Certainly, if any of you have experience in this space, you may have seen it much more accelerated than that, or perhaps longer term than that, but generally speaking. Then on the right side of the screen, you see the stimulus funding and the cycle time for that. So a much more accelerated 6 to 20 week period. I'm getting a lot of this data from a global grant consulting firm that we're leveraging in our program. I'm going to tell you about the program here in a minute, but we, along with Network Solutions, have been working with a global grant consulting firm to help unpack really the landscape, put together a program that helps, again, you, the client, be able to access these funds more readily. So if you think about the types of projects that might receive a grant award. So you see here, I've got this broken out by a couple different sectors: state and local government, higher ed, K-12, and healthcare. And thinking about the types of projects that you may be considering, maybe you're already in the middle of deployment, or they're glimmering some IT director's eye right now. But based on all the data so far, through the stimulus funding and through working with our grants consultant, these are the types of projects that we're seeing receive funding from the grants. This is not an end-all, be-all list, so it just gives you a sense of the types of areas that we're seeing a very likely award from the stimulus funding. So that is the background. Again, the multiple grant packages that are available, the accelerated time to getting a grant, and in some cases, I've actually heard that the grant application process for stimulus funding has been greatly simplified as well. So maybe traditionally they're 10 or 15-page grant applications. In many cases, for some of the stimulus funding, maybe it's 3 to 5 pages. And again, your experience may be certainly different. These are anecdotal comments that I've received in talking with clients and with the grant consultant we're working with. But anyway, in our distribution role, working with resellers like Network Solutions, we've come up with this strategic program to help our resellers and ultimately the clients to figure out this landscape. So a couple things you need to know. First of all, there's no cost to you to take advantage of this program. From our position as a global distributor, we look for programs that we can invest in to help our resellers get out in front of the market, take advantage of a market opportunity, and ultimately help the clients, again, address the challenge that you have in your technology needs. So there's no cost to this program. There are 3 primary deliverables that you would be able to take advantage of in this program working with Network Solutions. The first is a funding report that leads to an in-depth project consultation with the grants office, and then ultimately working with the grants office to help you prepare your grant application. And I'll drill into these deliverables in a little more detail here in the next slide. But as you're thinking about the way to approach this and the grant landscape, there's a couple things to take into consideration. First off, the grant program that we're talking about here today, it was really started because of the stimulus funding. But within this program, and in taking advantage of it through Network Solutions, you'll have a full 360-degree view of all the grants that would apply to your particular situation and to the IT projects you're looking to address. So if you need help identifying what funds might be available to you, if you need help, talking through the IT projects and what might qualify, and then ultimately, would you benefit from working through that with a global grants consultant? That's what this program is about. And I apologize, I thought I had a second slide here. So let me drill into those deliverables a little bit more and talk about the engagement. So working through Network Solutions, you will identify one or more IT projects. So again, let's talk about either enhancing your campus safety as an example, or enhancing your distance learning for rural students that are trying to access curriculum from home. Just 2 examples. So working with Network Solutions, they would complete what we refer to as an information collection tool document. It's a very short question and answer document that we would leverage then to go identify the entire grant landscape that would align to your needs. So this funding report that ultimately comes out of the information collection tool would be very specific to your entity and your IT project. So this is not a funding report that's a broad brush or a whitewash kind of report. It's specific to you as an individual client for the location that you're in, and then also aligning specifically to those IT projects that you're looking to get funding for. So you work with Network Solutions. They fill out the information collection tool. They submit it to our grant consultant. The grant consultant, again, they'll look through the entire grant landscape to identify those funding vehicles. And again, both stimulus-related and not stimulus-related, the traditional funding grants that are there year in, year out. They'll provide that funding report back to Network Solutions and then ultimately get passed back to you, the client. And then the next step is to join a call to go through that funding report with the grants consultant. I've seen these funding reports. Usually they're 20 or so pages, in some cases much more than that, depending on some of the specifics of what you're looking to receive funding for. But they're very detailed. And so we always suggest strongly that you as the client get on a call with the global grant consultant to go through that funding report, get your questions answered. You'll see some funds that you might have already applied for, as an example. And so they would want to be aware of that. But once they've identified the grants through this funding report, then they'll start to work with you on the specifics of your IT project or projects that you're looking to receive funding for, just to make sure that they're zeroing in on the most likely grant vehicles for those projects. And then they'll start to work with you on the development of the grant application itself. So who within your organization has responsibility to put a grant application together? have they ever done one before? We know there's a lot of resource limitations and challenges, and so maybe there's somebody that has had experience that's in your organization, maybe not. So helping and working with the grants office to understand that. And again, have you applied for any grants? That'll be important to know as we go through this consulting engagement. But ultimately, with you working with the global grant consultant, they would help to figure out, again, the grant application, work with your teams to prepare that grant application. They'll share their best practices with you based on their years of experience. And then they'll even review iterations of the application before it gets submitted. So draft one, you guys would complete that after consulting with the grants firm. They would review it, make your suggestions and so forth, send it back. So there'll be multiple iterations of the application that the grants office would review with you just to make sure it's in its best possible format before that grant application gets submitted. Now, I don't know if I mentioned the name of the firm, but I will mention them so you're aware of who we're talking about here. The global grant consultant firm's name is Grants Office. I mean, that's the name of the firm. They're headquartered in Rochester, New York. I think I mentioned they're a global grant consulting firm. They've been in business for 20 plus years. So they know this industry very, very well. They have experts in all of the subverticals, K-12, higher ed, healthcare, public safety, state government, local government, and so forth. So in this program, you have the opportunity at no charge to you to take advantage of this grant consultant, get their help to have you work through, again, identifying what funding is available, identifying of that funding, what aligns to your IT project, and then ultimately helping you through the process of applying for those grants. So we wanted to make sure, and Chris and Steve asked me to join this breakout today, just to make sure that you had a good understanding what is available to you. The team from Network Solutions sponsoring this breakout here today, they're there in force at the conference this week. I'd be happy to talk to you further about it. But as we wrap up, the formal presentation part of this, and before we move to Q&A, think about the landscape again. The stimulus funding continues to be made available, but as these different packages become available, it becomes more and more complex. Again, as I mentioned before, overlapping timelines and expiration, different qualifiers, and so forth. Again, we recognize that at the client level, you guys are resource constrained in many cases, and that becomes a challenge to chase these funds with everything else you've got on your plate every day. And then helping you to maximize the grant award through this program is really ultimately the goal, so that you, in your mission to deliver, high-class education and curriculum and related student services, this program will help you to find the funding to deploy those technologies that will help you to do that. So it's very brief. Hopefully you found that informative and useful. Again, my name is Terry Walsh. I'm with TD Synnex, and I've got Chris listed here. I think Chris will be at the conference tomorrow. And of course, Steve is there in the room. But I hope, again, that you take advantage of this program through Network Solutions to help you, again, find this funding that continues to be out there. So with that, Chris, I don't know if you want to jump into Q&A, or if you want to add on top of that, or Steve.
Yeah, Terry, hey, this is Chris. Thank you very much for your presentation. Greatly appreciate that. So I am Chris Jankovic. I'm Director of Sales at Network Solutions. We are here to partner with you from an education perspective, through the grant support program. I think the key variable I want to make sure there's a good understanding of, as Terry mentioned, is that, from an education perspective, you have a lot on your plate. Traditionally, some schools have individuals on staff that write the grants. Some those individuals that are tasked to write the grants they're multitasked, right? So this is just one of the things that they're doing, as many things are on their plate. We want to take that off your plate. Now, what's a variable that can be very positive for you? So traditionally, if somebody writes a grant internally, they're looking at roughly about a 20% success rate. Maybe it's a little bit more if it's somebody that's specialized. From a grants office perspective, that's all they do. They write grants every day. For organizations like yourself, their success rate is above 60% when it comes to writing grants for companies like educational facilities like yourself. So you have the ability to partner, again, at no cost, as Terry mentioned. with the grants office and network solutions to be able to provide grant writing for you. Number one, provide an avenue to find the right grant that fits your need, right? Number two, then follow up that with writing the grant for you to see the success that can come forth. So, Terry, thank you. Are there any questions this morning from anybody in the group regarding grant funding and the grant support program?
I actually did have a question. Being a superintendent of a small district, I have a central office that's composed of myself and 2 treasurers. Obviously, grant writing support is definitely a need in my district. My question would be with this infrastructure bill, obviously it's all encompassing. It's not necessarily just in the world of broadband and IT. Would you guys have availability to help leverage more funds in various areas beyond just IT, or is it just specifically in that realm? I know I'm in a tech conference, I'm a superintendent, so I'm just asking.
Well, I'll try to tackle that, Chris, first. But so the program as it's designed is focused on the technology solutions area. The firm that we're using, if you work with network solutions on some of your IT projects that you have, you'll get to know that grant consulting firm, and then they do all manner of grant processing and so forth. So you can establish a relationship with them and get some of your non-technical grant challenges maybe addressed by working with them directly.
All right. Thank you, Terry.